Okay, this is Thursday, April 5th. Okay, you only have to do trigonometry today. That's it. So, hint, values on the calculator. Radical 3 over 2 is 0.866. Radical 2 over 2 is 0.707. And we're going to determine the exact value, no decimals, of each. Exact value. This might be a non-calculator section. So be ready to do this on a non-calculator. Nope, I think we're going to have a calculator. So you could just punch this in your calculator. So you'd have to go to radians and punch this in. But let's see, hopefully you know this. This is 30. What's the sine of 30? 1/2. If you want to punch in a calculator, you have to be in radians. You can get this answer. Cosine of pi. The ordered pair for pi is this, so the cosine is -1. Tan of pi over 2. Pi over 2 is up here. We want tan. Tan is y over x, so it's undefined. Cosine of 45 is radical 2 over radical 2. Sine of 45 is the same thing. 210 is a 30 degree, is in third quadrant, so you're all the way over here. Third quadrant, so we know it's negative, right? So this is a 30, so 30's ordered pair is this, and we want the sign, so it should be -1/2. Punch it in your calculator, you'll get it. Tan of 315, this is the fourth quadrant. You're all the way over here, okay? So tangent, all scholars take calculus. Tangent is negative in this quadrant, it's -1. Again, guys, this is not rocket science. We can punch these in our calculator. Tan of 315 is -1. Cosine of 2 pi. 2 pi is 1, 0, right? With the cosine, it's 1. And sine of 3 pi over 2. 3 pi over 2 is down here. The ordered pair for that is 0, -1. We want the sine of it, so it's -1. If you want to punch something like this into the calculator, you have to go to radians, though, because it's got a pi. What is the period of tangent? You have to remember that tangent and cotangent have defined the periods. You take pi over that b, right? Pi over b. So in this case, it's pi over 8. Now you got to remember that sine, cosine, secant, and cosecant, you do 2 pi over b. But for this one, it's tangent, so it's pi over 8. That is the period. What is the period and amplitude of this? The amplitude is 2. And the period, because it's sine, this time the period's 2 pi over b. So in this case, it's 2 pi over 5. So the period is 2 pi over 5. What is the vertical shift? There is none. It would have to be something that's added or subtracted at the end. But let's just practice this one. What is this 3? This 3 is an amplitude. You would have to factor out, I believe the one on the common assessment, you do have to factor a 2 out. So let's factor a 2 out. If you factor a 2 out, you get this. So the 2, what would the period be for this one? I know they're not asking it, but I'm going to be asking it on the test. So the period of this one is 2 pi over 2, which is pi. And the horizontal shift is pi over 2 to the right. Would you be able to graph something like this? I think we should practice, because the one on the test you have to practice. I know you don't have to on this one, but let's practice. So the first thing you'd have to do is realize that your period is, okay, there's no vertical shift. I think the first thing you have to do is the amplitude. So you have up 3, that's like their ceiling. I'll put a ceiling here. And then down 3, floor. The period is next. It is pi. So you want your fourth hash mark to be pi. But what if I kept going? Okay, but you want your fourth hash mark to be whatever the period is. So that means that this one's pi over 4. Now remember, the shift's pi over 2 to the right. So I'm going to graph this one without the shift first. So just with this motion right there, and it's cosine, you would start high and end high at the period. So it looks something like this. But we're going to shift it pi over 2 to the right. Now pi over 2 is actually 2 hash marks. So you would take this point right here and you shift it 2 points to the right. You take this one 2 points to the right. Take this one 2 points to the right. Take this one 2 points to the right. And then this one 2 points to the right. And that's what it's going to look like, that red one. So if you kept going, looks like every 2 is a thing. And then it's going to hit here. Something like that. You just keep going. And remember, you can graph these on your calculator. What is the y-intercept of y equals cosine x? The y-intercept is where it crosses the x-axis. So let's just practice here. We have cosine x. Now you have to know, do you want to be in degrees or radians? It looks like here, use the interval 0 to 2 pi. So we're going to have to switch our mode to radians. And then on your window, we want to go from, it says 0 to 2 pi. So that's very important. So the x min is 0. The x max is 2 pi. Now my scale would be, because this is just cosine, my scale would be, because the period's 2 pi, this is pi, that means my period would be pi over 2, my scale, because it's a fourth of whatever the period is. And the y's, I don't think you need to go very high here. It's in like -3 to 3, and this should give you a graph. So that's what your cosine looks like. So it says, what's the y-intercept? The y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So it's 1, right? It's not 0, it's 1. If it was a sine, it would be 0. Where does sine x equal 0? When is sine 0? Sine is 0 here and here. So when is sine 0? It looks like at 0, at pi, at 2 pi, at 3 pi, at 4 pi. So you would say at pi n, where n is an integer. Where does cosine x equal 1? So let's look at our unit circle. This is again 1, 0, 0, 1, -1, 0, 0, -1. When is cosine 1? Right here. Now, cosine is not 1 over here. It's only here. So you could say there's a couple ways. You could say at pi n, where n is even. You could say at 2 pi n, where n is an integer. So that would be 2 pi, 4 pi, 3, 6y. So you could do either one. I accept either one of those. Find the exact solutions of this interval. So we're going to solve. Let's add 2. Let's divide by 6. And we're going to take the arc sine of 2. Well, this should be nothing because you can't take the arc sine of 2. If you just pressed in arc sine here of 2, we're in the radians, but even so, it's going to be an error. You can't because sine has a 1 and -1 max and min. So this is never. So over here, we need to get our cosines on one side. Let's subtract 3 cosine theta over here. Then let's subtract 5 over here. Then let's divide by 2. And let's take the arc cosine of -1/2. So when is cosine, first of all, when's cosine 1/2? Cosine's 1/2 at 60. So where's cosine negative? Cosine is negative here and here. The reference angle here is 60. If you punch in arc cosine, I'm going to switch back to degrees for this. You got to be careful on the test to be switching back and forth from degrees to radians. All right, so if you press in arc cosine of 1/2, you get that reference angle of 60. So cosine is negative here and here, so it'd be 180 minus 60 and 180 plus 60. So these should be your answers. Keep going because this is still trigonometry. So we have some formulas that I'm going to give you on the test. There they are. And it says evaluate using a sum or difference identity. So we want sum identity. So we want this sign. We want the top sign. This. So we're going to say it's equal to sine pi cosine x, and we're using the plus sign here, cosine pi sine x. So you're just going first angle, second angle, first angle, second angle, first angle, second angle, first angle, second angle, with the plus. So what is, okay, pi is -1, 0. That's the order pair. So sine of pi is 0. Cosine of pi is -1. So this is 0 plus negative sine x. So your answer is negative sine x. So that's all you have to do. This one's cosine difference. Cosine difference is you're going to use the bottom sign. So you're using the plus. So it's cosine x. I'm following this right here. Cosine pi plus sine x sine pi. So again, we got the same order paired. Pi, -1, 0. So cosine x times cosine pi. Cosine pi is -1. Sine x times sine pi, which is 0. So this is negative cosine x, and that's 0. So this is your answer. Find the missing side of the triangle, 2 decimal places. We're going to use our law of cosines. Law of cosines, remember guys, the ones I gave you in the class was like this. I just start like that. So I would say we'll call this side x. X is equal, I just do a big square root, and we're going to go side 1 squared plus side 2 squared minus 2 times side 1 times side 2 times the cosine of 62. Make sure you're in degrees before you do this. Check your thing. Are you in degrees? Make sure you're in degrees. You're going to have to be able to do this tomorrow or Tuesday. So we had square root of 160 squared plus 250 squared minus 2 times 160 times 250 times cosine of 62. Enter. So it's 224.816. It says 2 decimal places, so it's 224.82 feet. Okay, so that's you're done with